I remember the moment as if it were carved into my bones, the sterile chill of the operating room, the hum of machines keeping rhythm with my racing heart. I lay there on that narrow table, the thin hospital gown barely covering me, my veins filled with a cold drip that made my arm heavy. I kept telling myself this was worth it. This was the only way. My son was waiting, unconscious on another table just across from me, his life tethered to the skill of surgeons and the gift of my body. I had carried him once inside me, and now I would give him part of me again. That was what mothers did, wasn't it? That was what love demanded. The bright lights were almost too much, a halo that made the edges of the room blur. I could hear the surgeon murmuring instructions, the clatter of metal trays being readied. A nurse leaned close and whispered that they were almost ready to begin, that the anesthesia would soon pull me under. I nodded, though my throat was dry, and a lump pressed against the base of it. Fear? No, something heavier. Something I couldn't quite name. And then, just as the anesthesiologist touched the mask to my face, the doors burst open. It wasn't the calm swing of a professional entrance. It was a crash, a violent shove that made the metal handles slam into the walls. Everyone froze, gloved hands hovering midair, eyes snapping to the figure who stood framed in the doorway. It was my grandson. His chest heaved as though he had run the entire length of the hospital. His hair stuck damp to his forehead, his cheeks streaked with tears. His eyes, those sweet wide eyes I had kissed 1,000 times when he was small, were wild, frantic, desperate. His voice cracked as he shouted words that sliced through the sterile air. "Stop! Don't let her do this!" The mask slipped from the anesthesiologist's hand. A nurse gasped. I tried to lift my head, but straps and IV lines kept me pinned. My body was already heavy, the drugs beginning to creep into my veins, but my mind sharpened instantly at his voice. "Please," he cried again, stumbling into the room despite the protests of the staff who rushed to block him. His hands trembled as he pointed at me, his lips quivering around the words that seemed to burn him from the inside. "She can't give him her kidney. You don't know the truth!" The surgeon barked an order for security. A nurse tried to push him back, but my grandson struggled. His body frail compared to theirs, but fueled by something greater. Terror, or maybe guilt. And then he shouted it again, louder this time, tears breaking free and sliding down his face. "You can't let her do this, because he doesn't deserve it." The room seemed to tilt. My heart thundered so hard that the monitors began to beep in alarm. I tried to call his name, to ask what he meant, but the anesthesia was a creeping fog, pulling me under even as I fought it. My grandson's sobs echoed in my ears as the world dimmed around me. The last thing I saw before everything dissolved into black was his face, twisted with anguish, his mouth shaping words I couldn't fully hear, words that would change everything I thought I knew about my family. When I woke again, the surgery had not happened. I wasn't lighter by a kidney. My son wasn't saved, at least not by me. The doctors hovered around my bed, their faces uneasy, their voices careful. They said the procedure had been delayed, that complications had arisen. But I knew. I knew the truth had slammed through those doors with my grandson. And as I lay there, weak and trembling, my mind traveled backward. Because secrets like that don't appear from nowhere. They are born in the shadows, hidden beneath years of silence, festering beneath smiles and polite conversations. Mine had been waiting for decades. I should have seen it coming. I should have known. But when you love someone, you blind yourself, don't you? You turn away from the warning signs because the alternative is too painful to face. You tell yourself it will be better, that people change, that blood is thicker than betrayal. But deep down, I think I always knew. I remembered the early years, when my son was still just a boy. I raised him alone, pouring every ounce of myself into his life. He was my purpose, my joy, my reason for pushing through days when the world felt too heavy. We didn't have much, but I made sure he never felt the sharp edge of poverty. I worked 2 jobs, 3 sometimes, my hands blistered and my back aching, but I would come home with a smile plastered on my face, pretending it was easy. Pretending for him. And oh, he was beautiful. He had eyes like summer skies, and when he laughed, the whole world seemed to pause. Teachers said he was bright, destined for something more, and I believed them with all my heart. I built my life around that belief, that my son would rise higher than I ever could. that he would be the one to break the cycle of struggle. But love, blind and consuming, makes fools of us all. The first time I caught him in a lie, he was 12. A small thing, or so I told myself. He said he had stayed late at school, but I found out later he'd been roaming the streets with boys older than him. Boys with restless eyes and quick hands. When I confronted him, he shrugged it off, promised it wouldn't happen again. And I wanted to believe him, so I did. But lies, like weeds, never stay small. By the time he was 15, there were more of them. He lied about his grades, about the money that went missing from my purse, about the broken window in the neighbor's shed. Every time he looked at me with those eyes that mirrored my own, and every time I forgave, because he was my son, because I couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't good at heart. When he became a father himself, I thought things would change. Responsibility has a way of straightening out even the most crooked paths, doesn't it? At least, that's what I told myself. I thought holding his own child, my precious grandson, would awaken something in him, and for a while it seemed to. He smiled more, he worked harder, or at least he pretended to. I let myself believe we had turned a corner, but shadows never stay buried. The whispers reached me slowly, from neighbors, from friends who didn't want to interfere, but couldn't keep silent either. They said he was gambling, that he owed money to the wrong people. They said his temper was quick, that his wife flinched when his voice rose. I confronted him, trembling, praying it was untrue. He laughed in my face, said people were jealous, that they wanted to see him fail, and oh, how ashamed I am to admit it, I let myself believe him again. Because mothers don't stop loving, even when they should, even when it hurts. I worked harder, dug deeper, tried to fill the cracks he created. When his rent was late, I paid it. When his car broke down, I found a way to fix it. When he lost yet another job, I dipped into my own meager savings, always telling myself this was temporary, that he just needed time, that he would find his footing. But the years rolled by, and the cracks grew wider. And through it all, my grandson watched. That sweet boy, quiet and thoughtful, saw everything. He saw the lies, the outbursts, the way his father's shadow fell across all our lives. And though he rarely spoke of it, I could see it in his eyes, the hurt, the confusion, the longing for something better. I tried to shield him, to be a safe place when the world inside his home felt sharp and cruel. He would come to me after school, sit at my table, eat the meals I cooked with more love than ingredients. We would talk about books, about dreams, about places far away from the small town that felt like a trap. And sometimes, late at night, I would hear him crying in the room I kept ready for him. His sobs muffled against the pillow. I would sit outside the door, my own tears silent, my heart breaking for a child who deserved so much more. It was in those moments that I realized the truth I had been avoiding for so long. My son wasn't just lost. He was dangerous, and the cost of my love might one day be more than I could bear. Still, I never imagined it would come to this. To a hospital bed, my body offered up as salvation, and my grandson storming in to stop it. I never imagined his secret, the truth he carried, would shatter the fragile illusion I had clung to for decades. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling of that hospital room, I knew the past was rushing to catch me, and soon I would learn just how deep the betrayal ran. I tried to sleep that night in the hospital, but sleep is impossible when the heart is at war with itself. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandson standing in that operating room doorway, his chest heaving, his voice trembling as he begged them to stop me. I saw the anguish on his face, the desperation, the way his body shook as though he carried a weight too heavy for someone his age. Why would he do it? Why would he risk humiliating me, risk his father's life, risk everything in that one desperate act? The questions churned like a storm inside me, and with them came memories, sharp and unforgiving, pulling me back through the years I had tried so hard to bury. I thought about the first time my son raised his voice to me. He was a teenager then, taller than me already, his voice deepening with manhood. I had asked him where he had been, why he had come home with eyes red and hands trembling. He had looked at me, jaw tight, and snapped, "You don't own me. Stop treating me like a child." It was the first crack, the first time I saw the man he would become. His anger burned hot, quick and unforgiving. And instead of standing my ground, I stepped back, heart aching, telling myself it was just a phase. Boys lash out, boys grow into men. I told myself he would soften. That time would turn him gentle. But time only sharpened him. I remembered the night his wife came to me. She stood on my porch, her eyes swollen, her hands shaking. She said she couldn't take it anymore. His temper, his lies, the way he made her feel small, worthless. She wanted to leave. She wanted to take my grandson and disappear. I begged her to stay. Even now, the memory makes me sick. I begged her to stay with him because I was terrified of what it would mean if she left, terrified of admitting to myself what he truly was. I told her he just needed patience, that he was under pressure, that things would get better. I used every excuse I could summon, because facing the truth, that my son was cruel, was more than I could bear. She stayed. And every bruise that followed, every tear my grandson shed in the dark, was a weight on my soul. The years blurred after that. He lost jobs, borrowed money, lied, manipulated. He had a gift for twisting words, for making me feel guilty even when he was the one who failed. He would look at me with those same sky-colored eyes he had as a child, and I would cave. I would empty my savings, pawn my jewelry, sacrifice my own needs just to keep him afloat. And all the while, my grandson grew. Quiet, watchful, carrying the scars of a childhood steeped in chaos. He rarely spoke of it, but sometimes I would catch the look in his eyes, the disappointment, the hurt, the disbelief that someone could treat their own mother the way his father treated me. And I would wonder if he hated me a little too, for allowing it. Perhaps he was right to. Because when love turns into blindness, it isn't just the mother who suffers. It's the children who inherit the shadows. The night before the surgery, he came to my house. I should have seen then that something was wrong, but I was too distracted, too consumed with the thought of what lay ahead. I was ironing clothes for the hospital stay, folding them neatly into a bag when he walked in. His shoulders were hunched, his face pale, his hands trembling. "Grandma," he said softly, almost in a whisper. I looked up and smiled, though my heart ached at the sight of him. "What is it, sweetheart?" He hesitated, shifting from foot to foot. His eyes glistened as though he was holding back tears. "Do you really have to do this? Do you really have to give it to him?" I set the iron down and crossed the room, cupping his face in my hands. "He's my son," I said simply, as if that explained everything. "He needs me, and if I can save him, then I will." His lips trembled, but he didn't speak. Instead, he hugged me tightly, his arms clinging to me as though he was afraid to let go. I held him, stroked his hair, whispered that everything would be all right. But even then, deep down, I knew it wasn't. Because the truth always finds its way out, no matter how long you bury it. The next morning, I went to the hospital with a strange heaviness in my chest. It wasn't fear of the surgery. I had made peace with that. It was something else, something I couldn't name. But it sat like a stone in my stomach. And now I understood. Now I knew. That heaviness was the truth pressing at the edges of our lives, waiting to burst free. When my grandson stormed into that operating room, I knew he had carried something inside him for far too long. And the way he looked at me, it wasn't anger. It was sorrow. It was love, because he hadn't done it to hurt me. He had done it to save me. But save me from what? I lay in that hospital bed after they postponed the surgery, my mind unraveling, piecing together fragments of memory I had ignored for years. And the picture they formed was ugly, damning. I thought of the money that disappeared, the debts that piled up, the times my son swore he would change, only to fall deeper into darkness. I thought of the way my grandson flinched whenever his father's voice rose, the way he tried to shield his mother, the way he carried a burden no child should bear. And then, for the first time, I allowed myself to consider the unthinkable. What if my son didn't deserve to be saved? The thought clawed at me, made me sick to my stomach. A mother isn't supposed to think that way. A mother is supposed to love unconditionally, to forgive endlessly, to sacrifice without hesitation. That was the creed I had lived by all my life. But sitting there in that sterile room, staring at the white ceiling tiles. I felt a crack in that creed. For the first time, I wondered if my love had been misplaced, if my blindness had caused more harm than good. And then the door opened. My grandson stepped in, his face pale, his hands twisting nervously. He closed the door behind him and stood there, his shoulders trembling, as though the weight of the world pressed down on them. "Grandma," he whispered. I beckoned him closer, my voice hoarse. "Tell me, please, tell me why you stopped them." He sat beside me, his eyes fixed on the floor. For a long moment he said nothing, his lips pressed into a thin line, his chest rising and falling too quickly. And then finally, he looked up, tears brimming in his eyes. "Because if you saved him," he said softly, his voice breaking, "you'd be saving a man who doesn't deserve you. A man who's hurt us all. A man who's not who you think he is." My breath caught. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. I reached for his hand, clutching it tight. "What do you mean?" I whispered. His eyes flickered with pain, with fear, with a truth too heavy for someone his age. And when he finally spoke, the words shattered me. "Because he's not just my father," he said, his voice trembling. "He's a monster, and you don't know half of what he's done." The room spun around me. My grip on his hand tightened. My body shook with the force of my own heartbeat. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. Because secrets like these don't end with a single revelation. They unravel, thread by thread, until the whole fabric of a family comes apart, and mine was about to tear wide open. His words struck me like a thunderclap, tearing through the walls I had built around my heart. "He's a monster," my grandson whispered. And though part of me wanted to deny it, to reject it, another part, a quieter, older, wiser part, knew he was telling the truth. I sat there, frozen, unable to breathe. My whole life I had carried the weight of my son's failures, his temper, his lies. I had forgiven him, excused him, shielded him from the world and from himself. But never, not once, had I allowed myself to believe that he was anything worse than broken, flawed, a man who had simply lost his way. But now my grandson's eyes told me otherwise. Eyes that had seen more than a child ever should. Eyes that carried pain I could no longer ignore. "Tell me," I whispered, though my voice cracked on the words. "Tell me everything," he hesitated. His hands trembled in mine. His lips parted, then closed again as though the truth was too heavy to release. For a moment I thought he might bolt from the room, keep it all buried. But then his shoulders slumped, and he let out a shuddering breath. "Grandma," he said, his voice barely audible. "You think he just gets angry sometimes. You think it's just yelling, maybe a little pushing, maybe a temper he can't control. But it's not. It's worse, so much worse." I braced myself, my heart pounding, my stomach churning. "He doesn't just yell at Mom," he continued. He breaks her, not just with his hands, with his words. He makes her feel like she's nothing, like she's dirt under his shoes. He calls her names I can't even repeat. He tells her she's worthless, that she's lucky he even lets her stay. And when she cries, when she begs him to stop, he laughs. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his cheeks. "I've seen it, Grandma. I've heard it, night after night, through the walls. She cries herself to sleep while he lies there like nothing happened." I closed my eyes, my chest aching with a pain deeper than any knife could inflict. I had known, deep down I had known, but hearing it from him made it undeniable. "And it's not just her," my grandson whispered, his voice breaking. "It's me too. He says I'll never be anything, that I'm weak, that I'll end up a failure just like her. Sometimes he, his voice faltered, caught in his throat. I squeezed his hands, my own tears blurring my vision. "What, sweetheart? Tell me." His jaw tightened, his body shaking. Sometimes he grabs me, shoves me. Once he hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. And when I told him to stop, he said I deserved it, that I had to learn how to be a man. A sob tore from my throat. My body shook with it. The image of my son's hand striking his own child seared into my mind like fire. My baby, the boy I had cradled, the boy whose fevered forehead I had kissed, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, had grown into this? I couldn't comprehend it, Couldn't reconcile the child I loved with the man my grandson described. But he wasn't finished. "That's why I couldn't let you do it," he said, his voice trembling with desperation. "If you gave him your kidney, if you saved his life, it would be like telling him everything he's done is okay. Like rewarding him for all the pain he's caused. He doesn't deserve your sacrifice, Grandma. He doesn't deserve you." His words echoed in the sterile room, heavy and merciless. And for the first time in my life, I found myself questioning the very foundation of my love. Because wasn't that what I had been doing all along? Rewarding him? Every time I forgave, every time I gave him another chance, every time I sacrificed my own peace for his chaos, I was telling him it was okay. That he could keep breaking us, and I would keep picking up the pieces. And now my grandson, my sweet, broken, beautiful grandson, was begging me to stop. I pulled him into my arms, holding him as tightly as I could. He buried his face in my shoulder, his body trembling with years of suppressed pain. I stroked his hair, whispering apologies, whispering promises I wasn't even sure I could keep. "I'm so sorry," I murmured. "I should have protected you. I should have protected both of you. I didn't want to see. But I see now. I see." He clung to me, sobbing, and for a moment we were just two broken souls clinging to each other in a world that had been too cruel. But as the minutes passed, another feeling began to stir inside me. It was faint at first, a flicker in the darkness, but it grew, slowly, steadily, until it filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Not the hot, reckless anger my son carried like a torch. This was different. This was righteous, fierce, the kind of anger that demanded justice, that demanded change. I had spent my life excusing him, protecting him, sacrificing for him. But now, as I held my grandson in my arms, I realized something vital. I couldn't save my son. But maybe, just maybe, I could save my grandson. That thought lit a fire in me. The door creaked open then, and my son stepped into the room. His face was pale from the illness eating at him, but his eyes still held that sharpness, that entitlement, that dangerous glint I had ignored for too long. He looked from me to his son, his jaw tightening. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice rough, edged with suspicion. My grandson stiffened in my arms, his body trembling. I held him tighter, refusing to let go. "Nothing," I said softly, though my eyes met his with a new resolve. A resolve I knew he could see, even if he didn't yet understand it, because something had shifted inside me, something that couldn't be undone, and for the first time in my life I wasn't afraid of him. He frowned, his gaze narrowing, but he didn't press. He muttered something under his breath and left the room, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also liberating. For the first time, the truth was no longer hidden. For the first time, the chains that bound me had begun to crack. I turned back to my grandson, brushing the tears from his cheeks. "We're going to be okay," I whispered. "I don't know how yet, but we will. I promise you." He nodded, though doubt still lingered in his eyes. But that was okay. Because now, finally, I was ready to fight for him. I didn't know then just how much darker the truth would get. I didn't know the secrets still lurking in the shadows, the betrayals waiting to be uncovered. But I knew this. Our family would never be the same again. And the battle for our survival had only just begun. The silence after he left lingered like smoke after a fire, heavy, suffocating. My grandson sat beside me, his face pale, his hands knotted in his lap. I wanted to shield him, to whisk him away from all of it, but we were already too deep in the storm. That night, as the machines hummed quietly in my hospital room, I couldn't stop replaying my life in my head. Every birthday party, every scraped knee, every time I had looked at my son and told myself he was good at heart, I had built an entire world on that belief. And now, sitting there in the dim light, I realized that world had been nothing but a fragile illusion. My grandson stirred in the chair beside me. He had refused to go home, refused to leave me alone. His loyalty broke my heart, loyalty I should never have needed from a boy his age. "Grandma," he said suddenly, his voice soft but steady. "Do you know what he did last year?" I turned to him, dread prickling up my spine. "What do you mean?" He bit his lip, hesitating, then leaned closer. "He made Mom sign papers she didn't understand. He said it was for the house, for bills, but it wasn't. It was a loan, thousands of dollars, and when she found out, when she asked him why, he told her it was her fault for not reading it. He screamed at her until she stopped asking questions." My stomach knotted. I could almost see it, my son towering over his wife, his voice booming, her shoulders shrinking under the weight of his fury. I had seen enough of those moments to fill a lifetime. "He used the money for himself," my grandson whispered. "Not for us. For drinking, for gambling. And when it was gone, he borrowed more. And now we're drowning in debt." I closed my eyes, the truth burning through me. My savings, the jewelry I had pawned, the sacrifices I had made, they had all been swallowed by the same void. And all the while I had convinced myself I was helping him, but it hadn't been help. It had been fuel for his destruction. My grandson's voice trembled as he went on. "That's why Mom can't leave. She has nothing. He's taken everything from her. And he knows it, he uses it. He tells her no one would ever want her, that she couldn't survive without him. And she believes him, Grandma. She believes him because he's broken her down so much she can't see the truth anymore." Tears stung my eyes. I reached for his hand, holding it tight, silently promising that I would never let him break us again. But before I could speak, the door opened again, and there he was. My son. He walked in with that same swagger, even weakened by illness. His eyes flickered from me to his son, suspicion etched in every line of his face. "What are you two whispering about?" he demanded. My grandson stiffened, his hand tightening in mine. I forced myself to stay calm, to meet his gaze without flinching. "Nothing," I said, my voice steady. "Just talking." He narrowed his eyes, then gave a cold, humorless laugh. "Talking. That's all you ever do. Talk and judge. You think you know everything, don't you? You think you're better than me?" His words cut deep, but I refused to let them show. For once I would not shrink. For once I would not cower. "Go get some rest," I said firmly, though my heart pounded. "You need your strength for tomorrow." He sneered, muttered something under his breath, and left as quickly as he came. The door clicked shut, and I exhaled shakily. My grandson turned to me, eyes wide. "Grandma, he knows. He knows we're talking about him." I nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time he did. Because the truth could only stay buried so long before it clawed its way to the surface. The next day, I woke to the sound of hushed voices outside my room. My grandson was gone, probably down the hall getting coffee, but I could hear my son's voice, low and sharp, speaking to someone. I strained to listen, my blood running cold as I caught fragments. "She can't back out now. She owes me, if she doesn't go through with it." The words blurred, but the intent was clear. He wasn't grateful. He wasn't humbled. He wasn't even afraid. He was scheming. Even on the edge of death, he was scheming. The door opened, and he stepped inside, his face smoothed into a mask of false tenderness. "Mom," he said softly, "you ready for today?" I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. And what I saw wasn't the boy I had raised. It wasn't even the man he pretended to be. It was something darker, something hollow. "I'm not sure anymore," I said quietly. His jaw tightened, a flash of anger in his eyes, but he forced a smile. "You don't mean that. You're doing this for me, for family. That's what you always taught me, isn't it? Family first, family first." The words stung like poison. He had twisted them, weaponized them, used them to chain us all to his cruelty. But I wasn't the same woman anymore. "I taught you love," I said, my voice trembling but strong. "I taught you sacrifice. But I didn't teach you to destroy the people who love you. That's something you chose on your own." His smile faltered. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Not fear of death, fear of exposure, fear of losing the control he had clung to for so long. Before he could respond, the door opened again, and my grandson walked in. He froze at the sight of his father, then squared his shoulders, his jaw set with a courage that made me ache with pride. "We need to talk," he said firmly. The air crackled with tension as the three of us stood there, bound together by blood but divided by truth. And in that moment, I knew the day of reckoning had come. The room felt smaller than it was, the air heavy with the weight of all that had been left unsaid for years. My son stood by the window, his arms crossed, his jaw tight. My grandson stood near the foot of my bed, his fists clenched, his eyes burning with something that was no longer just fear. It was resolve. "We need to talk," my grandson repeated, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. My son gave a cold laugh, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Talk? About what? About how you two are conspiring against me? About how you're trying to turn my own mother against me?" "No one had to turn her against you," my grandson shot back. "You did that all by yourself." The words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. My son's face darkened, his eyes narrowing into slits. "Watch your mouth, boy," he growled. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know enough," my grandson said, his voice breaking but strong. "I know what you've done. To Mom, to me, to Grandma. I've lived it. I've felt it. And I won't let you do it anymore." My son's chest heaved with fury. He took a step forward, towering over his child, the same way he had so many times before. But this time, something was different. My grandson didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He held his ground, his jaw set, his eyes locked on his father's. And for the first time, I saw my son hesitate. "Enough," I said, my voice trembling but loud enough to slice through the tension. Both of them turned to me, their faces etched with shock. I had never raised my voice to him before. Not like that. "Sit down," I told him. "Both of you." My son scoffed, but when I didn't look away, when I didn't back down, he finally lowered himself into the chair by the bed. My grandson remained standing, shoulders squared, his breath ragged but steady. I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had broken us, the child I had loved more than life itself, and I felt my heart crack wide open. "Do you know why you're here?" I asked quietly. He frowned. "Because I'm sick. Because I need you." "No," I whispered. "You're here because you've destroyed everything around you, and you still expect us to save you. You think love means we have to keep sacrificing ourselves, no matter how much you hurt us, but that's not love. That's abuse." His eyes widened, shock flashing across his face. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," I cut him off. My voice was shaking, but the fire inside me burned stronger than it ever had. "I've spent my whole life protecting you, excusing you, believing in you. But I see you now. I see what you've become, and I won't close my eyes anymore." He opened his mouth to argue, but my grandson's voice broke through, raw and unfiltered. "She's right, Dad. You've taken everything from us. You've hurt us over and over, and you never stop. You don't deserve her. You don't deserve her sacrifice." Tears blurred my vision as I reached for my grandson's hand. His fingers laced through mine, steady and strong. "I can't give you my kidney," I told my son. The words felt like a stone being lifted from my chest. "I can't save you, not this time. Because if I do, it will destroy me and it will destroy him, and I won't let that happen." For a moment, silence filled the room. My son's face twisted, disbelief giving way to rage. "You'd let me die?" he hissed. "You'd turn your back on your own son?" I swallowed hard, my heart breaking, but my voice did not waver. "I'm not turning my back on you. You turned your back on us a long time ago, and now I have to protect what's left." His chair scraped violently against the floor as he shot to his feet, his fists clenched, his body trembling with fury. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might strike out, the way he always had. But then his body sagged and he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. The echo of it rattled through me, but then silence. A silence that felt different this time, not suffocating, not heavy, liberating. I looked at my grandson, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stared at me as though he couldn't quite believe what I had done. "You chose me," he whispered. I cupped his face in my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Always," I said softly. "I should have done it sooner. But from now on, I will always choose you." He fell into my arms then, and we wept together, tears of grief for what we had lost, but also tears of relief for what we had finally broken free from. The days that followed were not easy. My son raged, begged, cursed, manipulated. He called me heartless, called me a traitor, called me the worst kind of mother, but I didn't bend. Not this time, and slowly he stopped coming, stopped calling, stopped trying. It hurt. It will always hurt, to know the boy I raised is gone, swallowed by his own darkness. But when I look at my grandson, I know I made the right choice. Because sometimes love means sacrifice, and sometimes it means letting go. I still think about him, of course. A mother never stops thinking about her child no matter what. But now, when I pray not for his healing, but for his soul. For forgiveness I can't give, but maybe God can. As for me and my grandson, we are healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. He smiles more now. He laughs sometimes. And when I look into his eyes, I don't see only pain anymore. I see hope. I gave him something far more precious than a kidney. I gave him freedom. And that I know now is the truest kind of love.